There comes a time in every man's heart when words no longer serve a purpose, when his silence becomes his only truth. At first, she doesn't see it. She mistakes his quiet for detachment, his stillness for disinterest. She doesn't understand that silence is never the beginning. It's always the end of a long story filled with effort, patience, and unspoken disappointment. He used to explain, to reach out, to try to fix things. But a man who feels unheard eventually stops trying to be understood. And that's when his silence begins to speak louder than anything he could have ever said. In the beginning, his love spoke through action. He showed up, stayed consistent, listened when she vented, and stood by her when she was lost. She never noticed the weight of what that meant. She thought love was supposed to feel like this, safe, constant, always available. But over time, his warmth started to fade, not because he wanted to leave, but because he had slowly run out of space to give. Every unappreciated effort, every ignored word, every moment she made him feel invisible, it all built up quietly like water rising behind a dam. And when that dam finally broke, it didn't erupt in anger. It simply fell silent. That's what people misunderstand about men like him. They don't leave in rage. They leave in peace. They don't slam doors. They simply stop knocking. He stopped explaining what was wrong because he had realized she wasn't really listening. He stopped arguing because he finally understood that peace was more valuable than being right. He stopped trying to make her see his worth because he knew that true worth is never proven. It's either recognized or it isn't. At first, she was relieved by his calm. She mistook his silence as forgiveness, thinking the storm had passed. But slowly, she noticed something shift. The messages became shorter. The attention became lighter. The little things he used to do, checking in, remembering, reassuring, faded into memory. It was then that she began to feel uneasy, sensing something she couldn't name. She tried to provoke emotion, maybe even conflict, just to feel something again. But there was nothing left to provoke. His silence was impenetrable. It was the sound of a man who had finally made peace with letting go. She didn't realize that silence is not absence. It's a mirror. It reflects everything you failed to see when noise filled the space. In that silence, she began to replay everything she once dismissed. The moments he tried to reach her, the times he swallowed his pride to make things work, the small acts of love that had once gone unnoticed. The silence reminded her of all the noise she had created when she should have been listening. And now, every quiet second felt heavier than words. There's something haunting about realizing too late what that silence meant. Because by the time she understood, it was no longer a pause. It was closure. He had withdrawn his energy, his attention, his presence. Not to punish her, but to protect what little remained of himself. She began to miss the very things she once took for granted. The good morning texts, the gentle tone, the simple comfort of knowing he cared. And that's the cruel irony of life. We only begin to crave what we no longer have the privilege to ignore. His silence wasn't cold. It was sacred. It was the boundary he built when love had been stretched too thin. It was the language of a man who had given everything and realized it was no longer enough. And though she may never admit it out loud, that silence would follow her. Because once a man like that goes quiet, you don't forget the sound. It lingers in the spaces between your thoughts, reminding you of what was lost not through chaos, but through peace. And that's when regret begins, not in the moment he leaves, but in the moment you realize he already had. It always begins subtly. A man's energy doesn't change overnight. It fades like the setting sun, quietly, gradually, until the world around him looks the same, but feels entirely different. At first, she doesn't notice. She assumes his shorter replies mean he's busy, his distant eyes mean he's tired. She never imagines it could mean something deeper, something she caused. For a long time, he tried to explain his needs in ways she could understand. But when words failed, his energy began to speak for him. And unlike words, energy doesn't lie. There's a unique shift that happens when a man finally grows weary of being misunderstood. His tone softens, not out of affection, but surrender. He stops reacting to the things that once frustrated him, not because they no longer bother him, but because he no longer has the strength to care. That's the first sign, the quiet acceptance that replaces emotion. He's still there, but not as he once was. He listens, but his thoughts are elsewhere. He smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. And while she continues to live as if nothing has changed, he's already begun to detach. It's a strange paradox. She once loved his consistency, the way he made her feel safe, certain, and seen. But she took that safety as permanence. She believed he would always wait, always understand, always stay no matter how much she neglected his emotional needs. So when his energy began to shift, when the warmth in his voice turned neutral, when the spark in his gaze grew dim, she didn't panic. She thought he'd come around, as he always did. What she didn't realize was that this time, something inside him had already begun to close. When a man's energy shifts, it's not loud or dramatic. It's gentle, almost invisible at first. He doesn't argue, he doesn't chase, he doesn't beg for understanding. He simply starts moving differently. The messages become delayed, the conversations become surface level, the effort that once defined his love begins to dissolve. But the truth is, he's not trying to punish her. He's just protecting his peace. He's realizing that love should never require him to lose himself. And that's when she starts to feel it, not through his words, but through the emptiness between them. There's a void now, a quiet gap that wasn't there before. She feels it when he looks at her, but doesn't really see her. She feels it when she shares something important, and his response is calm, distant, almost detached. He's there in body, but his heart has already taken a step back. That's the moment when her intuition finally wakes up. She begins to sense the difference, the shift in rhythm, the unfamiliar stillness in what once felt alive. Regret begins not when he leaves, but when she realizes she's no longer sure he's emotionally there. She starts to remember the times she ignored his pain, the moments she dismissed his efforts. She replays conversations where he tried to tell her how he felt, and she responded with indifference or impatience. It all starts to come back, one memory at a time, as the reality sets in that his love didn't disappear. It simply ran out of places to go. She begins to miss his energy long before he's gone. The way he used to make her feel seen, the way his attention used to warm her spirit. Now every silence feels heavier, every distance longer. She wonders what changed, not realizing it wasn't sudden. It was a slow withdrawal built from too many moments she didn't notice. And when she finally sees it, it's too late. Because once a man's energy shifts from loving to leaving, there's no way to bring it back by force. She'll try to reach him again, with the same words that once worked, but they'll sound empty now. She'll try to hold his gaze, but he won't linger like before. His energy will stay calm, kind, and detached, like someone who's already said goodbye without speaking the words. And that's when she'll understand that the greatest regret isn't losing him when he left. It's realizing she lost him while he was still there. There's a moment every woman remembers, not when he leaves, but when she sees him truly happy without her. It's the quiet shock that hits deeper than any argument, deeper than any breakup. One day she's scrolling through her feed, maybe out of habit, and there he is, smiling, at peace, surrounded by calm energy that doesn't carry the weight she once brought into his life. It's not the smile that hurts her. It's the realization that it no longer belongs to her world, that he has found joy that exists beyond her reach. At first, she tells herself she's happy for him, that he deserves peace, and maybe a part of her truly believes that. But underneath, something begins to ache, because now she can see what she couldn't before, the way he's glowing with the kind of serenity she once took for granted. The man she thought would always be waiting for her has changed. Not because someone new appeared, but because he finally learned to find happiness within himself. And that is the moment she realizes what she lost was never just a person. It was a presence. She remembers how she used to brush off his efforts, how his need for connection sometimes felt like too much. She remembers the way he'd ask about her day, how he'd make time when no one else did, how he'd listen even when he was tired. She thought those things would never stop, that his care was something guaranteed. But seeing him now, unbothered, grounded, whole, she begins to understand the price of taking consistency for granted. Because when a man who once centered his world around you learns to center it around himself, you can never reclaim that space. There's something haunting about seeing the version of him that only emerged after you left. He's more confident now, lighter, stronger. He speaks with clarity, moves with purpose, laughs without hesitation. And for the first time, she notices the difference between the man who loved her and the man who healed from her. The first gave endlessly. The second gives selectively. The first waited for understanding. The second has nothing left to prove. What makes it harder is that she never imagined he'd stop needing her. She thought he'd always carry that quiet longing, that hidden softness for what they once had. But now, when she reaches out, even casually, his responses are kind, but detached. No tension, no resentment, just peace. That's when it truly hits her. He has forgiven her in the most painful way possible, by moving on. His forgiveness didn't come through words, it came through freedom. Regret has a way of sneaking in through the smallest details. She catches herself thinking about how his voice used to sound when he called her name, how safe it felt to be in his presence. Those memories come back not as comfort, but as reminders of what she overlooked. She starts comparing the men she meets now to him, the patience, the loyalty, the emotional steadiness, and none of them measure up. Because while others may excite her for a while, none bring the peace he carried effortlessly. And now she knows that peace wasn't luck. It was love in its purest form. There's a peculiar irony in loss. It's only when he stops trying that she starts to see his worth. She begins to understand that his quiet presence was never ordinary. It was sacred. She realizes that while she was chasing excitement, he was offering stability. While she was testing his patience, he was building her comfort. And now he's doing all of that for himself, and maybe for someone else who sees what she couldn't. That's the point when regret turns from a thought into a feeling that lingers. Because she knows deep down, she had her chance with a man who was ready to give her the kind of love people spend their lives searching for. And now that love exists somewhere else, untouched, unbothered, and free. She might move on, she might love again, but that image of him smiling without her will always stay. Not as pain, but as a quiet lesson, that nothing hurts more than realizing the man who once needed you the most finally learned how to live without you. In the beginning, she thought his loyalty was something ordinary, something that came naturally to men who cared. She didn't see it as rare because he made it look effortless. He showed up every time she needed him. He listened even when she spoke in circles, stayed calm when she was unpredictable, and forgave things others would have walked away from. To her, that wasn't loyalty, it was simply who he was. But that's the problem with genuine hearts. They make love look easy until they're gone. And only then does she realize how uncommon that consistency truly was. She thought his predictability meant he lacked excitement. She mistook his steadiness for dullness, his devotion for dependency. When a man loves deeply, he doesn't always do it with grand gestures or loud declarations. He does it through quiet repetition, through the text every morning, the call to make sure she's safe, the patience in his tone even when he's tired. To him, loyalty isn't a choice, it's a reflection of his nature. But to her, it began to feel like routine. She didn't know that routine was what love becomes when it matures, when it shifts from spark to steadiness, from intensity to depth. As time passed, she started craving chaos without realizing it. She wanted the thrill of uncertainty, the rush of passion that feels wild and new. And so, she tested him, through silence, through distance, through the sharp edge of indifference. But he stayed. He stayed because that's what loyalty does. It doesn't run at the first sign of difficulty. Yet each time he stayed, she valued it a little less. His love was so constant that it became invisible to her. She thought it would always be there, like gravity, always holding her, even when she stopped noticing its pull. It wasn't until she met inconsistency that she began to understand the sacredness of what she had lost, because the world outside him wasn't kind. It was full of half-hearted promises and temporary affection. She met people who said all the right things, but disappeared when things got inconvenient. She heard sweet words that never turned into action, affection that never lasted beyond the moment. That's when the weight of what she had taken for granted began to sink in. She realized that loyalty wasn't weakness, it was strength disguised as patience. There's a deep kind of regret that comes when you finally see the difference between someone who loved you and someone who simply liked you. The man she once called predictable had been her anchor, the one who steadied her chaos without complaint. He didn't just love her when it was easy, he loved her when she made it hard. And now, as she looks back, she sees how he carried the emotional weight of two people trying to make it work. She had thought his calm was complacency, when in truth it was wisdom, the understanding that love is not always about excitement, but endurance. When she finally realizes what real loyalty feels like, it's through the memory of his silence, through the moments when he stayed gentle even after she pushed him away, through the thought of him still wishing her well long after he stopped being part of her life. She begins to see that loyalty isn't about staying forever. It's about staying true while you're there. And he was. Entirely. Now, when she meets men who waver with the wind, who disappear at the first disagreement, she remembers the one who never did. The one who made love feel steady, not fleeting. She begins to understand that loyalty is not about excitement. It's about peace. And in that realization, she feels the quiet ache of what she lost. Because she finally understands that loyalty, like his, doesn't come twice. It's once in a lifetime, and she spent hers assuming it would always wait. There comes a time when she wakes up and the world feels quieter, not in a peaceful way, but in a haunting one. The stillness doesn't comfort her. It reminds her of what's missing. The laughter that once filled her evenings now echoes in her memory. The man who used to check in, who made her feel seen without her having to ask, has disappeared from her orbit. At first, she tries to convince herself it's fine. She tells herself she needed space, that he was too available, too constant. But slowly, the silence she once desired becomes unbearable. It's in that stillness she begins to feel the weight of his absence. Everyday moments start to carry ghosts of him. A song plays and her mind drifts back to the car rides they used to take. She scrolls past a random quote online, and suddenly, it feels like it was written just for her regret. The coffee doesn't taste the same, the mornings don't start with warmth, and even though her world is full of people, it feels strangely empty. What she doesn't realize right away is that his presence was never loud. It was grounding. He had been the steady rhythm beneath her chaos, the quiet reassurance that made her feel safe even on uncertain days. When he was there, she didn't notice how much peace he brought. It wasn't dramatic or flashy, it was subtle. He didn't try to fix her storms. He simply stood beside her until they passed. And now that he's gone, she realizes how rare that kind of stability was. In a world full of people who only show up when it's convenient, he was the one who stayed when it was hard. That realization doesn't hit all at once. It builds slowly, like a tide creeping closer until it's too late to escape. She tries to distract herself, maybe with new people, maybe with business. But no matter where she turns, something feels off. Others might flatter her, make her laugh, keep her entertained, but none of them feel like home. None of them know her the way he did. The pauses in her speech, the little habits, the subtle shifts in her energy. With him, she never had to explain herself. With others, she's constantly performing, constantly proving, and it's exhausting. That's when the truth starts to unfold. Not all presence is equal. Some people make your life louder, others make it clearer. He made her feel whole. Time passes, but it doesn't heal the same way it used to. Because this isn't the kind of loss you move on from, it's the kind you learn to live with. Every now and then, she catches herself wanting to reach out, wanting to say something simple like, "I miss you." But she knows it's too late. He's moved on, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. The man she once took for granted now belongs to the peace she couldn't give him. And deep down, that hurts in ways she can't put into words. In quiet moments, she replays the times he was patient with her, the moments he stayed when she pushed him away, and how he always believed in her even when she doubted herself. Those memories don't fade. They linger like perfume on a letter you can't throw away. It's the scent of something pure, something once beautiful, that now only exists in memory. And that's when she understands the absence of a good man doesn't just leave a void. It teaches. It teaches her that love isn't about intensity, it's about presence. That the small gestures, the quiet care, the patience she once overlooked, those were the foundation of everything real. She realizes too late that the peace she feels missing wasn't a feeling, it was him. There comes a moment, often long after he's gone, when she finally begins to see things clearly. At first, she told herself that love had failed, that maybe it wasn't meant to last, that maybe he wasn't the right one. But as time softens her defenses and matures her perspective, she begins to see that love was never the problem. What failed wasn't the feeling. It was her awareness of it. She had been loved in a way that was quiet, patient, and unconditional. But she wasn't ready to understand that kind of love back then. She mistook it for simplicity when it was in truth the purest thing she'd ever received. She remembers how he used to look at her, not just with affection but with understanding. He saw her not as she pretended to be, but as she was. He saw through the moods, the pride, the distance, and still chose to stay. That kind of love doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't demand attention, it gives peace. But peace can feel unfamiliar when you've only known chaos. She was used to the thrill of uncertainty, the kind of love that burns fast and fades quickly. His love didn't burn, it glowed steadily. And because it didn't hurt, she couldn't recognize its worth. Now, as she looks back, she realizes how deeply he cared without needing to prove it. He didn't fight for validation, didn't try to make her see his value. He simply gave what he could and hoped she'd notice. And for a while she didn't. She thought love was supposed to feel like fireworks, not sunrise. She thought it had to be dramatic to be real. But when she matured, she began to understand that true love is not in the grand moments. It's in the everyday ones. It's in the way he remembered her stories, in the calm tone he used when she was angry, in the way he stayed even when she made it difficult. That's love, not the one that shouts, but the one that stays silent and sure. There's a painful beauty in hindsight. She starts to see that he wasn't just a chapter in her story, he was the lesson written between the lines. His love wasn't meant to break her, it was meant to teach her. It taught her that love without awareness is wasted, that affection without gratitude fades. She begins to understand that he wasn't asking for much, just to be seen, to be valued, to be appreciated for the quiet strength he carried. And she realizes she had it all, but her eyes were closed. When she sees him now, perhaps from afar, perhaps only through a memory, there's no bitterness, just a gentle ache, the kind that comes from understanding something too late. She doesn't want to go back, not because she's over him, but because she finally respects what they had. It wasn't meant to last forever, but it was meant to shape her. She knows now that love isn't about possession, it's about presence. And his presence, though gone, still lingers like a calm echo reminding her what real love feels like. In her quiet reflections, she sees herself not as the victim of a failed relationship, but as a student of love. Because that's what regret truly is, a form of awakening. It's the heart's way of saying, now you understand. She understands that love was never her enemy. It was her teacher, disguised as loss, and in that understanding, she finally makes peace with the memory of him, knowing that what they shared wasn't wasted. It was simply misunderstood. And that's when she realizes that sometimes the greatest kind of love doesn't end when it's lost. It continues through the wisdom it leaves behind.